December 24th, 2025 has transformed into a perilous situation throughout California as an exceptionally intense winter weather system strengthens its hold on the region. What residents anticipated as substantial holiday precipitation has developed into a critical emergency fueled by a stationary atmospheric river pumping continuous moisture into already susceptible terrain. The outcome includes extensive flooding, landslides, and swiftly worsening travel circumstances across much of the western region. From mountain communities in Southern California to significant urban areas, the tempest is overpowering infrastructure during a crucial period. Roadways are shutting down as water flows across travel lanes. Slopes damaged by previous year's wildfires are collapsing, and evacuation directives are being announced with minimal advance notice. Emergency authorities stress that this weather system is not functioning like a conventional winter storm. Its duration and power position it among the most hazardous precipitation events that forecasters monitor. Over 43 million residents throughout California, southern Nevada, and northwestern Arizona are presently under flood advisories or alerts. Significant urban centers, encompassing Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Las Vegas, are all situated within the threatened zone. Electrical failures are expanding. Emergency personnel are operating at maximum capacity, and circumstances continue to evolve constantly. This represents a storm reshaping the holiday environment, one that requires awareness, prudence, and seriousness as California confronts a swiftly developing, life-endangering weather catastrophe. The danger intensified late on December 22nd as meteorologists identified an unusual and concerning pattern establishing itself over the eastern Pacific. Instead of a solitary storm moving inland, a sequence of atmospheric rivers started channeling moisture into California successively, while upper atmosphere winds halted the system's movement. With no escape route, the moisture continued arriving continuously, establishing conditions for extended impacts. By December 23rd, precipitation strengthened across coastal regions, valleys, and elevated areas. What rendered this occurrence particularly hazardous was the pairing of length and strength. Precipitation volumes approached 1 inch hourly in multiple bands, quick enough to exceed drainage capacity, waterlog soil, and quickly elevate streams and waterways. Incorporated thunderstorms contributed unpredictability, generating sudden deluges and wind surges that additionally diminished response time for communities already anxious. Southern California's geography magnified the hazard. Slopes burned during last year's wildfire period were stripped of plant cover, leaving earth compacted and precarious. As precipitation persisted, water runoff quickened downward, converting canyons and typically dry channels into rapidly flowing passages capable of transporting mud, rocks, and wreckage without advance indication. As certainty increased in the predictions, the National Weather Service declared a high risk for excessive precipitation, the most critical classification available and one utilized on merely about 4% of days nationally. Historically, occurrences in this classification are accountable for a disproportionate portion of flood casualties and destruction. By the moment Christmas Eve commenced, the communication was unmistakable. This was not a temporary holiday storm. It was a fixed pattern position to intensify quickly, where minor breakdowns could cascade into extensive emergencies across an already burdened state. The pivotal transformation happened in the pre-dawn hours of Christmas Eve, when consistent rainfall strengthened into a continuous and dangerous wave. Throughout Southern California, precipitation volumes accelerated beyond what drainage infrastructure and landscape could manage. Roads flooded within moments. Storm passages overflowed, and water runoff started racing downward with mounting velocity and power. What had existed as a developing danger suddenly transformed into an active crisis in the mountain settlement of Wrightwood. The circumstances escalated quickly. Intense rain destabilized precipitous slopes, initiating debris torrents that propelled mud, rocks, and toppled trees onto thoroughfares. Officials declared mandatory evacuation directives, as circumstances deteriorated. State Route 2, the principal access passage through the San Gabriel Mountains, became entirely impassable, isolating the community and confining residents between rising waterways and obstructed roadways. Emergency personnel operated under dangerous circumstances to evaluate hazards, but entry was restricted by flooding and falling wreckage. Throughout the region elsewhere, comparable scenarios unfolded. Low-elevation communities filled with water as drainage systems collapsed. Underground passages flooded without forewarning, and vehicle movement halted along primary surface routes. Authorities implored motorists to reverse direction rather than try to traverse flooded thoroughfares, highlighting that even shallow, swift-moving water can overwhelm a vehicle. The storm brought supplementary dangers. Incorporated thunderstorms generated cloud-to-ground electrical strikes and sudden explosions of extreme precipitation. Weather scientists also cautioned that brief, temporary tornadoes could not be dismissed, an infrequent but genuine threat for California. Wind surges achieving 40 to 50 miles per hour additionally strained response activities, toppling trees and electrical lines. By mid-morning, emergency coordinators clarified this was no longer a forecast-based worry. The storm had progressed into a volatile stage where circumstances could deteriorate without alert and where timing and assessment would be vital for public protection. By late morning on Christmas Eve, meteorologists verified that California had entered into one of the most dangerous precipitation situations utilized in contemporary weather forecasting. The National Weather Service elevated substantial sections of the state into a high risk for excessive precipitation, the maximum classification on the scale, and one that is declared on merely about 4% of days nationwide. Throughout history, storms in this classification represent nearly one-third of all flood-associated deaths and roughly 80% of complete flood destruction. The magnitude of the danger was enormous. More than 43 million individuals across California, southern Nevada, and northwest Arizona were currently under flood advisories or alerts. Significant metropolitan territories, encompassing Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Las Vegas, discovered themselves directly vulnerable as precipitation intensified during the height of holiday transportation. Authorities emphasized that this was not gradual moving river flooding. Precipitation volumes nearing or surpassing 1 inch hourly signified that streams, typically dry channels, and urban drainage infrastructure could ascend swiftly with minimal to no forewarning. In low-elevation communities, water accumulated quicker than it could empty, while canyon thoroughfares and mountain passages became extremely hazardous due to runoff, falling stones, and diminished visibility. The peril was amplified by California's wildfire background. Substantial sections of Southern California remain marked by burns from the preceding year, leaving slopes unstable and incapable of absorbing intense rain. Emergency coordinators cautioned that debris torrents and mudslides could occur suddenly, advancing at high velocity and transporting boulders, trees, and vehicles downward. At this juncture, the circumstances were no longer theoretical or precautionary. Conditions existed for localized flooding to intensify into life-endangering crises within moments, triggering urgent evacuation directives, extensive road closures, and repeated advisories for the public to remain off the thoroughfares unless absolutely essential. As the precipitation continued descending, the storm started revealing the most vulnerable points in California's infrastructure. Throughout Southern and Central California, transportation networks faltered under the combined pressure of flooding, debris, and diminished visibility. Portions of Interstate 10, Interstate 5, Interstate 210, and Highway 101 were repeatedly closed down as water exceeded lanes, mudslides spilled across roadways, and disabled vehicles obstructed emergency entry. Holiday transportation decelerated to a crawl, then ceased altogether in certain passages. Electrical systems were next to strain. Service providers reported more than 100,000 customers without electricity as wind surges between 40 and 50 miles per hour brought down trees and electrical lines. In impacted communities, Residences went dark while precipitation continued descending, compelling families to depend on flashlights, battery-operated radios, and backup generators. Emergency authorities prioritized hospitals, shelters, and water processing facilities, while repairs in residential zones were postponed by hazardous circumstances. The human toll was no longer theoretical. In Sacramento County, officials verified at least one weather-associated fatality after a vehicle collided during intense rain. Authorities cautioned that flooded thoroughfares dramatically elevate collision hazard even for skilled drivers and implored residents to refrain from travel unless absolutely essential. Emergency personnel prepared for a surge in swift water rescues as streams and drainage passages overflowed. Evacuation directives displaced families with minimal advance notice, compelling people to abandon residences during the holidays and pursue temporary refuge. By Christmas Eve afternoon, the storm had progressed beyond predictions and advisories. It was actively transforming daily existence, disrupting mobility, severing power, and endangering lives across a broad expanse of the state. As the storm strengthened its hold, California's emergency response progressed into a critical stage. State and regional agencies transitioned from preparation to continuous crisis management, operating against time, weather, and access limitations. Governor Gavin Newsom verified that emergency officials had been mobilized across numerous counties, with resources pre-deployed to respond as circumstances worsened. Swift water rescue squads, high-clearance vehicles, and emergency shelter provisions were distributed in anticipation of extensive flooding and debris-associated emergencies. Fire departments, sheriff's departments, and search and rescue divisions functioned continuously. In flood-susceptible zones, rescue watercraft were positioned near waterways and drainage passages anticipated to ascend swiftly. In foothill and mountain territories, personnel monitored precarious slopes and burn-marked terrain, prepared to announce new evacuation directives with minimal notice. Authorities cautioned that once thoroughfares were flooded or obstructed by debris, response durations would decelerate dramatically, rendering early advisories and public adherence critical. Despite intensive action, officials recognized the constraints of response. Flooded highways, mudslides, toppled trees, and electrical strikes rendered certain communities temporarily inaccessible. Responders themselves confronted substantial peril navigating rapid-moving water, precarious terrain, and poor visibility while endeavoring to reach those in distress. Weather scientists advised that the circumstances were far from concluded. Although precipitation was anticipated to diminish briefly later in the evening, supplementary rounds of intense rain were predicted for Thursday and Friday, renewing the danger of flooding, landslides, and debris torrents each day. With soil already waterlogged, even moderate precipitation could initiate new crises. By the conclusion of Christmas Eve, authorities conveyed a sobering communication. This was not a brief-lived catastrophe. The approaching days would demand vigilance, patience, and collaboration as California continued confronting an evolving winter emergency with no immediate conclusion in sight. As Christmas Eve draws to a close, California remains anxious. What transpired over the previous 24 hours is no longer a developing weather narrative. It is a statewide emergency with enduring ramifications. Flooded highways, isolated mountain settlements, evacuation directives, power failures, and verified fatalities have converted a holiday into a moment of vigilance and uncertainty for millions of individuals. Authorities caution that the peril does not conclude when precipitation briefly diminishes. Waterlogged ground, precarious hillsides, compromised infrastructure, and swollen waterways signify the hazard will persist for days. Supplementary storms anticipated later this week could quickly revive flooding, initiate new debris torrents, and reverse any brief progress. In these circumstances, a single choice, whether to navigate through standing water, postpone evacuation, or disregard an alert, can transform into the distinction between protection and catastrophe. This storm is also a manifestation of a broader transformation. Occurrences once regarded as uncommon are materializing with greater regularity and strength. High-hazard precipitation classifications, extensive evacuations, and cascading infrastructure breakdowns are becoming components of the contemporary winter reality. Preparedness is no longer discretionary. It is vital. For emergency personnel, the work persists through the night. For families throughout California, the priority is unmistakable. Remain informed, remain off flooded thoroughfares, and adhere to official guidance without hesitation. Awareness preserves lives, and prudence provides time. If you find this coverage beneficial, like this video to support conscientious reporting. Distribute it to assist others in remaining informed, and subscribe to the channel for ongoing updates and comprehensive documentary storytelling on extreme weather occurrences. These narratives matter because comprehending what is transpiring can assist people in making safer decisions when it matters most. This situation is still developing. Remain alert, remain prepared, remain safe.
And then there's this bad boy. Good Lord. This is right below my home. Thank God I'm up on a hill.